Ukraine's drones turned Putin's private guest house in Crimea into a firestorm in under 10 minutes. September 21st, 2025. 1930 hours. Inside the lavish $50 million estate, Russia's elite gathered for a night of celebration, surrounded by layers of air defenses, radar stations, and patrol boats. On paper, it was impenetrable. Yet offshore, a single drone boat worth less than $250,000 released its swarm machines, small enough to hide in the spray of the waves, but precise enough to erase a fortress in minutes. The result was staggering. Millions wasted on missiles, chasing false targets, radar blinded, and a corridor of the Black Sea suddenly opened for Ukraine's lifeline exports. And here's the question for you. How can such small numbers rewrite the map of war? Stay with me, because the story of this strike will keep you on edge until the very end. 1927. The sea was a black sheet, the night sharper than any blade. In the cold hush, 6 silhouettes peeled away from the Mura V5, tiny ghosts slipping down the flank of the waves like sharks that had learned to fly. By the time the clocks in 2 command rooms showed 1929, 340 seconds of terror had already been bought and paid for, but nobody knew which second would be the last anyone could call ordinary. They came in a tight braid, 5 low, 1 bait. The bait burst into a flare on a thermal scope and gave the defenders what they wanted a target to fall in love with. The other 5 kissed the water, hugging the cliff shadows and the blind spots radar hates. In 43 heartbeats, the prize would be struck. On the bridge of the Mura, a single breath measured it all. On a concrete console in Odessa, a young operator's fingers hovered, not on schematics but on a moral ledger. The chatter on encrypted lines was a thin thread. Coordinates, a single 2-word command, silence. Then electricity, the kind that makes a whole system lean one way or another. At 1930, the bait went down. A patrol boat celebrated a visible victory. Flares of sparks lit the sea like false fireworks. Hundreds of expensive rounds and a seeker missile screamed into where the aluminum fog had been and hit only the air, turning millions in armaments into a spent tantrum. The defenders traded fortune for illusion. That split second of triumph was the invitation. While radios blared and command rooms argued, the 5 real instruments of chaos climbed, skimmed, and bore in on the sanatorium's glowing heart. No fanfare, no triumphant trumpet, only the cold geometry of an attack that unfolded like a hinge swinging open, irrevocable and sudden. In the dark, small things moved with lethal intent. The biggest mistake was thinking size could buy certainty. 1931. The sea turned into a battlefield of signals. The decoy had already fallen, but what followed was the real strike. Out of nowhere, the lead drone spat out a glittering storm, 500 strips of metallic foil bursting into the night like a silver blizzard. On radar screens, the image multiplied, not 5 targets, not 10, but hundreds, racing forward at 60 miles an hour. The operators watching their scopes didn't see precision, they saw chaos. An army of phantoms had arrived, missiles worth millions ignited, streaking through the sky, tearing apart illusions that cost only a fraction to create. Each detonation lit the horizon, but every explosion was hollow. The swarm of false signatures had stolen the defenders' aim. Meanwhile, the true drones rode the shadow of the cliffs, sliding between waves, inches above the surface. Their flight path wasn't reckless, it was calculated genius. Hidden behind the wall of noise, they advanced unnoticed, step by step, breath by breath. In Odessa, the operator whispered through clenched teeth, "Stay low, let them waste their fire." He could see what others could not. Russia's strength bleeding away against nothing but smoke and sparks. And tell me this, if you were the one staring at that radar, the screen screaming with 100 red echoes, would you have the nerve to know which was real? Or would you, like them, spend fortunes firing at shadows while the real danger slipped closer in the dark? 1929, the Mura V5 had already vanished into the shipping lanes, its wake dissolving into the sea like it had never been there. But deep inside its fiberglass shell, the silence was heavy. The crew sat motionless, every system dimmed, every light masked, as if the vessel itself was holding its breath. It had played its part, delivering 6 machines into the night. Now its fate depended on them. Hundreds of miles away, beneath the concrete of Odessa, the air was suffocating. The command bunker was a room of flickering screens, green and red icons sliding across black maps. At the center sat a single operator, headphones pressed tight, sweat crawling down his temples. He wasn't flying one machine. He was holding 5 lives of carbon and steel in his fingertips, balancing them against the storm that raged outside the signal lines. Each blip carried its own heartbeat. Drone 2 steady, Drone 4 climbing, Drone 5 weaving into the cliff shadow. but Drone 3 faltered. Its corrupted antenna made every gust of wind a brutal shove, its course wobbling by degrees that could end the mission. The operator's jaw clenched as he forced the controls, nudging it back on track, fighting physics with pure willpower. Around him, officers whispered, phones rang, static filled the air. Yet inside his headset, the world was reduced to one sound, the hollow buzz of engines skimming the water. Every second survived was a triumph, every meter gained a victory. And as the clock moved toward 1932, the swarm crept ever closer to the Crimean coast, unseen, unbroken, and unstoppable. 1932. The cliffs of Crimea flickered with heat signatures as Spetsnaz patrols swept the rocks, their scopes searching for ghosts. One operator spotted movement and pulled the trigger of his electronic rifle. The decoy drone collapsed in sparks, swallowed by the waves. A victory call went out across the channel, short, triumphant, and fatally premature. At the Yalta defense sector, the alarm triggered a chain of steel and fire. A Pantsir S-1 roared to life, its radar locking onto the storm of metallic echoes drifting toward the coast. To its crew, the display showed not a handful of intruders, but a massive formation surging at impossible speed. The order came fast: intercept. A missile worth nearly $2 million ignited, climbing to Mach 3, slicing through the night toward nothing more than aluminum fragments. The explosion lit the horizon like lightning, but the target had never been real. In the distance, a Su-30 fighter screamed into the sky, afterburners tearing the clouds apart. It banked hard over the coastline, hunting for specks against the sea. But the swarm was no longer one target. It had split into multiple layers. 2 hugging the waves, 3 rising into the air. The geometry became impossible, angles too steep, altitudes too uneven. For every maneuver, there was a blind spot. By 1933, Russian defenses had spent millions of rubles firing into shadows. Behind the noise, the 5 drones pressed forward, unshaken. Their silence was their shield, and their approach could no longer be stopped. 1934. As Russian defenses scrambled, one of the OSA drones shifted its disguise. Its electronic pulse bent into something new, broadcasting the faint but unmistakable signature of a civilian aircraft. On the radar screens of Sevastopol, the image was unmistakable. A slow-moving passenger plane drifting off course, its trajectory angling dangerously close to a coastal town and a school just beyond the ridge. Inside the Russian command post, the room froze. Officers leaned over consoles, voices colliding, orders contradicting one another. Was it a threat, or was it a tragedy in the making? Firing now meant risking an international disaster. Hesitating meant leaving the airspace undefended. For 7 seconds, the network stalled under the weight of uncertainty. In those 7 seconds, the bluff achieved its purpose. While commanders argued, the real drones slipped through the corridor of silence. 4 remained, weaving between the cliffs, unseen, undetected, their shadows blending into the sea spray. Far offshore, the Mura V5 played its own hand. With its hull already hidden in shipping lanes, it emitted a false signal of a larger vessel. A Russian patrol boat picked up the phantom contact, veering out to investigate, unknowingly clearing the path for the approaching swarm. By 1935, confusion had become a weapon sharper than steel. The defenders, blinded by illusions and paralyzed by hesitation, no longer saw what mattered most. The 4 drones were inside the final perimeter, their course locked on the glowing windows of the sanatorium ahead. 1936. The coastline erupted in thunder. From hidden emplacements, 30mm cannons opened fire, stitching the sky with 4,000 rounds per minute. The tracers carved lines of fire across the night, a curtain meant to cut down anything that dared to pass. To the defenders, it was the final wall, a storm no fragile machine could possibly survive. But the swarm did not scatter. The 4 OSA drones held formation, gliding through the chaos like arrows loosed from the same bow. Each shell burst around them, fountains of spray exploding from the sea, sparks igniting in the air. The noise was overwhelming, yet the drones answered with silence, their engines humming steadily against the roar. In Odessa, the operator watched the icons lock in sequence. One target after another aligned over the sanatorium's main hall, the building glowing with heat from its crowded banquet rooms. The damaged 3rd drone corrected itself at the last moment, its course snapped true by a final beam of guidance. For the first time that night, every machine was in perfect sync. The decision was no longer a matter of chance. It was geometry, cold and merciless. At 1937, the operator leaned into his microphone, his voice flat and calm. Payload release. 4 warheads separated, fins snapping open. diving at 200 miles per hour toward their mark. Above the coastline, the curtain of fire still raged, but the arrows had already slipped through. The strike was no longer coming, it was inevitable. 1938. The first detonation tore the night apart. A shaped charge struck the glass dome of the main hall, not with noise alone but with precision, its energy punching straight through marble and steel as if the building were paper. A second warhead followed, finding the underground garage. In an instant, armored vehicles worth millions became nothing more than burning silhouettes against the sea. The third strike ripped through the kitchen wing, rupturing gas lines and hurling a rolling fireball through the western wall. The last impact hit the conference chamber itself, the very heart of the estate. Plans drafted in secrecy dissolved into ash within seconds. What had been a fortress of prestige and privilege collapsed into a scar of smoke and shattered stone. Across the Crimean coast, radar screens went black. The electromagnetic shock of the blasts cascaded through local networks, blinding the eyes that once scanned the Black Sea. Patrol vessels faltered, their guidance gone. For the first time in months, the waters opened wider than before. In Odessa, silence filled the command bunker. Operators stared at their screens as green icons faded into static. Then, one by one, the remaining drones banked hard, turning back toward the open water where the Mura V5 still waited. Their mission was finished. By dawn, the $50 million estate was nothing more than smoke, curling into the morning light. What began as a hidden banquet had ended as a landmark erased, and with it, a message carved deep into the strategy of the Black Sea. As daylight broke over the Black Sea, the coastline revealed its new shape. A ruin where luxury once stood, black scars cut into white stone. The sanatorium that had hosted officials and guarded plans was gone, erased in less than 10 minutes. But the greater shock was not the rubble, it was the silence. Radar arrays still slept, patrol boats drifted uncertain, and a stretch of sea once tightly sealed now lay open like a corridor drawn in salt water. For Ukraine, the strike was more than destruction. It was a demonstration that ingenuity could outmaneuver wealth, that precision could outplay raw power. A handful of drones, costing less than a single missile, had forced the Black Sea Fleet to pull back and widened the grain corridor by nearly 20%. Every ship that sailed safely in those hours carried proof that the balance of war could shift on the smallest of hinges. In Odessa, the operator finally removed his headset. He did not cheer, he did not smile. He simply exhaled, the weight of the night leaving his shoulders. The mission had ended, but its echo would last far longer than the smoke on the horizon. The oldest truth in warfare had spoken again. The mightiest fortress can be humbled not by size, but by strategy. And as the tide rolled back against the Crimean cliffs, it left a reminder etched into stone and memory alike. Empires, no matter how vast, remain vulnerable to the smallest arrow when it is aimed true. In just a few minutes, a fortress built on wealth and secrecy became nothing more than smoke rising above the Black Sea. What Russia thought untouchable was undone by patience, precision, and the smallest of machines. The strike was not only a tactical victory, it was a reminder that in modern warfare, creativity and courage can outweigh money and steel. But beyond the strategy and spectacle lies a deeper truth. Power is never absolute. Every empire, no matter how vast, carries a weakness waiting to be exposed. Ukraine's drones prove that the battlefield of tomorrow belongs not to the biggest weapons, but to the boldest ideas. And now I want to hear from you, was this operation pure genius, or the dawn of a dangerous new era where technology rewrites every rule of war? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from the front lines.